Well, Lynn Kuok is Kuan Yew Chair at the Brookings Institution. She joins us on Asia First this morning. Dr. Kuok, it's been over a year since we last spoke. Good to have you back. So I want to ask you about day two. Some say the real work begins today with one-on-one meetings scheduled before President Trump leaves in the afternoon. I'm wondering, where you see possible deals that might be announced, which are the issues that may be deferred to another day as well?
Thanks so much for having me on. It's nice to see you, Anu. Nice to see you, Julie. I think, your point that you just made about the real work beginning today, well, much of the real work as well. I mean, the first day of the summit was very much real work as well, insofar as it set the political direction and the course of where the two leaders wanted the relationship to go. That said, by real work, if you mean, the grunt work of ensuring that there are deals to take home to the respective publics, yes, that indeed is going to take place today, Friday, on your end. And I think, the deals that we're expecting to take place are very much transactional ones, in the sense that these are deals that are targeted at taking home large-scale purchases of, say, agriculture or aircraft to the American public, who are suffering in the midst of rising inflation and who want to see results from this presidency. So, but unless, I think, in terms of deals, in terms of how to deal with more thorny issues, or say export controls and other economic issues or political issues even that might be afflicting the U.S.-China relationship.
Yes, specifically the issue of Taiwan, Dr. seemingly handled very carefully on day one, with Mr. Trump not publicly responding to President Xi's warning. But do you see it coming up again on day two and being the biggest risk, perhaps, that could derail the momentum despite this apparent stabilization in ties?
I think both sides have a real incentive to keep our relations on an even keel. Both sides are at the summit to ensure that there is a floor in terms of how far economic relations deteriorate. So I think they're both laser focused in terms of ensuring that the economic relations are not sidetracked or derailed by any other issue. China, as you mentioned, raised the Taiwan issue. And there have certainly been concerns that, especially on the part of Taiwan or even some members of the US Congress, that Taiwan or its interests would be traded away for US economic interests or Trump's interests. And I think that these concerns are several-fold. First, there's concerns that there will be a change in the official U.S. position regarding Taiwan. I don't expect that to be the case. Second, short of an official change in the official position, they are concerns that there might be rhetoric that sort of soft pedals the U.S. approach. And so I think in this respect, the concern is that rather than the U.S. saying that it does not support Taiwan independence, the U.S. will actually say that it actively opposes Taiwan independence. I also don't think that Trump will be trading away that leverage so easily. And there is also the concern, and I think this might be a real concern in the context of this particular meeting, of an arms deal that doesn't go through. Currently, there's about $14 billion of an arms sale pending the U.S. president's approval. And the United States president has been urged to push forward with that deal since around January, but I think he's holding that out as leverage. And in fact, he confirmed that that particular deal would be under discussion at the summit between himself and President Xi. And of course, from Taiwan's perspective, that's perhaps a breach of the spirit of the Taiwan Relations Act, as well as the 6 assurances previously provided by the United States to Taiwan.
Okay, I hear you, Dr. Kuok. A lot of media outlets framing Taiwan as the standout, from day one. But to me, it was something different. And this was, President Xi, and I'm paraphrasing here, saying, yes, make America great again, but allow us to make China great also. So I'm wondering, how has this idea been received in the U.S.? Because I'm hearing that China hated Joe Biden's framing of the U.S. relationship with China as, a competitive one?
Well, I don't think that President Xi is saying that the US-China relationship won't be a competitive one. I think what was very striking about some of the comments that President Xi made, I think it was at the state dinner, was that he said that President Trump and himself agreed on a vision for the future, and he called it a constructive relationship of strategic stability. And in that constructive relationship, he talked about how, in this constructive relationship of strategic stability, cooperation would be the mainstay, but there would also be competition, but that competition needed to be kept within proper limits, and within those limits, that differences would be manageable. So he's not saying that the relationship won't be competitive or there'll be no competitive elements within that relationship, but he's hoping that, that would be ring-fenced within a certain narrow set of issues, I think the implication was, and, differences within that properly managed. Of course, the difficulty would be ensuring that the set of issues that afflict both the US and China relationship doesn't progressively become larger and larger, as we saw happen during the Biden administration and into the Trump administration, where originally they talked about a small yard and a high fence, but that small yard became bigger and bigger. So now the challenge, I think, for both parties is to ensure that the issues that they do actually disagree about actually potentially impact national security in a sort of in a very concrete and direct sense, rather than saying that everything affects national security and therefore everything affects the US-China relationship.
Okay, and Doctor, how do you think countries like, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and even here in ASEAN states are, these countries have been spending years preparing for worsening U.S.-China rivalry. So how do you think they are viewing this summit? Does it reassure them or create sort of fresh uncertainty about where they stand?
Well, I think there have been concerns on the part of, say, countries like Japan, Taiwan, for instance. We've already discussed that their interests would be traded away by the United States. But it's also fair, I think, to say that countries do not want, whether it's these countries or Southeast Asian countries, they do not want the economic relationship between the two great powers to deteriorate further. They don't want the political and strategic relationship between the two great powers to deteriorate further, because that turbulence is going to cause a lot of instability to them as well. And we see that from the fallout in various clashes between, or tensions between China and the United States, not least the tariffs. So I think, insofar as this particular summit is able to put the relationship on a more even keel in terms of moving it forward in the right direction, the right trajectory, even though there might be competitive elements, I think that's an important thing for countries all around the world. And they should be breathing actually a huge sigh of relief, given the events that we've seen in the recent year or so.
Okay, that's good to hear as well. Dr. Kuok, great talking to you again. Thank you for making the time. Lynn Kuok is Lee Kuan Yew Chair at the Brookings Institution.